the way that we divvied this up, I'm going first.
Okay.
I'm Shawn Young, the founder of the Financial Health Institute, blah, blah, blah.
And you're supposed to talk into the microphone.
For the street.
Thank you, Shawn, you can pull it out.
My understanding is that they can hear me from at least 5 to 7 feet away, is what I was told.
It's a little spotty.
Spottier in here, okay.
It's better when you're like close to it.
Okay,
You can make it handheld if you want to.
thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, the monitor's
The monitor's gone, I can step away from the mic. For those of you online, is there anybody online, do we know?
I don't know.
We don't know.
AI might tell us.
If you're online and I'm away from the mic, I apologize. I have a tendency to wander. So yeah, I'm Shawn, founded Financial Health Institute, and I really don't know the order of the slideshow very well. So my part in this is just to kind of bring you into the idea of sort of how this concept emerged and sort of what we've done with it, and where in large part Fred has taken it and run with it more than we have. Yeah, so for those of you who were in my last session, I apologize for the duplication. We are asked to speak a lot around different concepts, and specifically for a long time, we've been asked to talk about, specifically out of Denver, what's called economic mobility. And in my last class, I went into great detail to demonstrate that nobody really knows what that means, and that. Are you guys all hearing that? Or is it just
you.
Just me? Oh, that's okay. I just want to make sure I'm not fucking crazy. Woo, you guys be all like, no. Shawn's having a moment again.
Those are the virtual people.
Yeah. Well, that's sort of what I thought for a minute, like they were trying to help him get online and stuff like that. But anyway, one of the big issues I have is a lack of clarity in the language that we use around all these things that we at FHI work on, and so economic mobility being one of those buzzwords, it just sort of gets thrown out. And so we created several years ago. So the reason I bring that up is because the conversation in economic adaptation, and why is it a conversation in economic adaptation, and that all of a sudden got loud. The reason why we call it that, is because maybe you guys all noticed around last November things got a little squirrely. A little bit. And then in January it got a little bit squirrely, and it continues to kind of be squirrely right now. Is that a nice word for it?
It's got worse than squirrely.
Worse than squirrely, okay. Yeah. It's a little chaotic, right? And this is the world that we've lived in for a long time. I've been doing this for almost 19 years now. And when I first started my organization back in 2007, I want you to think about that for a second. I started a nonprofit organization in 2007.
During financial crisis?
Yeah, brilliant, right? Good timing, Shawn. But it was chaos, a lot of chaos at that time. And one of the big things that happened during that particular time frame, specifically in Colorado, was with things being all chaotic, everybody wanted us to collaborate. It was all throughout all the language in our grant proposals and stuff like that. You need to collaborate, you need to work together. Does that sound familiar? You need to collaborate and work together and better utilize your resources. And then after a few years, I would argue that a lot of nonprofits don't work well together. But and collaboration is not always our best strong suit. But then after a few years, that language sort of went away, and we sort of went on about our business. And then we had COVID happen, and then everything got crazy for a little while. And but the difference is in the 2008 scenario and in the COVID scenario, you had the craziness, and it was followed by a huge cash infusion from the federal government. Now we're going through a chaotic time, and I don't think we're going to see that huge cash infusion again.
Cash extraction.
Yeah, I don't think we can see that.
Right. So anyway, so I started, I started just sort of like ear to the ground, fingers on the pulse, talking to people. And as early as December and especially in January, so many of the people I was talking to in our community were really freaking out. And, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I was kind of like, we've kind of been through this before. We've done this. And so I started finding myself being like, why do we continuously find ourselves in this reactionary position when it comes to these chaotic events? And it's the same thing that, like, I'm going to try and tie all this together in a way, I don't know if I'll be able to, but I'll try. But it's the same way we'd talk to our clients about managing their economic resources, right? Are you ready to absorb an economic shock? And we would talk about that with clients, but when we look at the organizations ourselves, organizations aren't really usually asked that question. Maybe the board talks about it a little bit, but I would say all in all, it's not a big part of the daily conversation of how is the organization going to absorb the next crisis when we all know that there's going to be what? There's going to be another crisis, but we keep thinking that we're going to get to this place of stability and security and that we're going to have it all figured out and it's going to be okay. But that's not the way that economics works, and it's definitely not the way the whole political economic environment works. So anyway, so I came up with this term economic adaptation because I think that that's what we're looking to move towards, is this way we're going to have to adapt one way or the other, right? That's just kind of the way of things, and Joanne can speak more in depth in terms of like this is not a new concept in the world, but to actually start to put things around the idea of how do we in our field specifically begin to move into a place where we are more proactive around how we prepare ourselves to help the people that we want to help so that we're not actually in the same position they are. And so that's how I just kind of threw this term together, and I said, this is what I want to study, this is what I want to research, this is what I want to do. And it really mirrored many of the different things that I have been doing for a long time in the field already. So I started off working specifically with people experiencing homelessness and intense economic stress and helping them with financial and economic education. And then we moved into working with frontline staff and how do we help them help themselves and help the people that they're helping. And then more recently, over the past several years, we've gotten more involved in systems design around economic education and training. And then fundamentally, in the last couple of years, I've gotten pretty adamant that I want systems to change. I want to see systemic change in financial and economic education. So that's been where I've been headed. What does this have to do with organizational scarcity? That was a good tie-in, wasn't it? I did that good. I'm making this shit up as I go. So.
You're also being recorded, but just let you know. Not that you care.
Yeah, long cast.
Wait. Take away my stipend. Oh, wait, there is no stipend. Fire me. Anyway, one of the things that I started working with in personal economics, personal finances and economics, was the idea that, what I recognize very clearly is that traditional financial literacy and education is built around the concept of neoclassical economics. Sorry. You guys want to teach this part? No. And neoclassical economics basically assumes human beings are perfectly rational, and if given perfect information, will act rationally. And how many of you guys know people who act perfectly rationally? Okay, 0. So 0 people answered that. So,
It's the only thing we hear.
right? They're like, God's speaking. No. So anyway, it's a fundamental flaw in traditional financial education. And so there's an emerging field called behavioral economics that emerged kind of in the 60s, kind of caught some traction in the early 2000s. And basically the premise of behavioral economics is that human beings are actually irrational, go figure, and that sometimes we act rationally. But most of the times we're kind of irrational, and if we understand that we're irrational, we can begin to kind of categorize all these different things that we do that are irrational. And instead of saying you're a bad person because of it, it basically says, no, humans do this. This is a thing humans do. It's not bad. It's something we do. And so then with an awareness of that, you can begin to build a way of shifting behaviors. So I had been doing this work for 6, 7 years. Are you any of you guys familiar with Bridges Out of Poverty? Do you guys remember those trainings? Do those still happen?
Yes, we still do.
They do? Okay. I haven't seen them. John, have you heard of them do it lately? No. If anybody would know, John would know. Anyway, I haven't seen them lately. But anyway, Bridges had this concept called tyranny of the moment. And I used that concept a lot because that felt like a lot of what people were going through is that when you have a moment that is so intense that it's very hard to see outside of that. But my issue with Bridges Out of Poverty was that it was focused solely on people in poverty. Instead of saying this is a human issue, this was a poverty issue. When in fact we all know that that's not necessarily true. And so in 2013, these two guys, McLain and Shafir, who one's a behavioral economist, one's a psychologist, came out with a book called Scarcity. The subtitle is Why Having So Little Means So Much. I think they've changed the subtitle since. And they put this book out about scarcity. And what they demonstrated in the book is that scarcity, I think I'm on to the next slide.
You could go to the slides. People getting bored looking at the titles there.
So here's the book. That was me in 2008.
You look a lot different.
Stress. Anyway, they wrote this whole book that describes this phenomenon of having less than you feel you need, which is sort of a part of just being an American, right? You just kind of wake up every day, I don't have as much as I feel I need. But what they demonstrated in there is that when people experience, in the same way stress is not necessarily universally bad. Some stress can be good. Eustress, you've heard E-U-S-T-R-E-S-S. Eustress is a good thing. Chronic stress, bad. Acute stress, not always bad. Same thing with scarcity, and they do delineate the difference between the two, which isn't important in this room. But acute scarcity, you can perform actually better, but chronic scarcity, you begin to see that people experiencing chronic scarcity begin to behave, check this out, predictably irrational. Let's say that one more time. People who are experiencing chronic scarcity begin to behave predictably irrational. What do you think that means?
Meaning that once they have faced so much scarcity, we can already determine, like, as you said, predictable, right, irrational. We can already predict certain unsafe behaviors that they will present in themselves.
Correct.
As they're dealing with us, telling us what their needs are.
Correct, 100%. That's it. Well done. You get to teach the rest of the class.
Yes. Do I get a gold star too?
Fred hands out gold stars. I'm not responsible for it. So understanding that, though, like I would be in the room all the time, and you would hear case managers or whatever, you hear people talking about, like, I don't understand why that person did that. They're expecting them to be acting rationally. What's one of the most irrational things that our clients do, or maybe identify some things that you've seen your clients do that is not rational? Sit?
Yes, when they know they're on deadlines, when they, like, let's say they have this housing application and the landlord has told them that room is coming open by the end of this week. Get your application into me in the next couple of days. We'll run yours first. And they say, okay. And then they sit.
They sit.
And they sit with it. And then they just waste that time. So then now they're in crunch time and they're stressing and they're panicking because they know that they're not going to get there.
Yep.
You know?
Okay.
Self-sabotage. There we go.
The same thing, they're expecting a pretty sizable tax return, and they're like 3 months behind in rent. Instead of putting it in your way, you blow it all on a TV or a car or something.
Yeah, Which is human.
Well, so that's the point.
I do that.
We all do that.
That's exactly the point. And so that's a fundamental premise of the things that we teach in our personal finance class, especially when we work with case managers, is when you begin to identify these as human things and not poor people things, not poverty people things, but these are human things, then we can now relate from a personal level and have a real conversation, right? And what happens very frequently, and I've taught all over the country about this, and people have very different experiences, but we start to put our own value system on what our needs and wants and how people ought to do and how people ought to do and how people ought to be and what they ought to value. We put ours on that when we're handing out the money. If we're on the right side of the desk, we get to tell them what that is, and then we get to judge them harshly for what they do. Whereas if we pull back the covers on our own lives, it might look very similar. Anyway, so one of the big ones I always talk about is the payday loan. When is a payday loan ever a rational thing to do?
That interest is way too high.
Yeah, there's how many people roll out of the bed in the morning and they're like, I can't wait to get my payday loan. You know, that's not it's not something that people just want to do. It is something that it's just not a rational decision, but people do it, and it's an exploding industry, right? This is not a small industry. It keeps growing. Buy now, pay later is catching on big right now, you know. And we have all these different things that people do that you look at and you're like, why? Why are we doing it? Well, it's because it's not necessarily rational, and people under constraints behave weird, irrational. Me too. And I got all sorts of things I do. I look just like that. So, different versions of scarcity. Point being, scarcity is not just about money. So scarcity can present in relationships, meaning like if you're lonely, people can act weird, irrational. If you're, time, you brought time. Time can be a thing. Food can be an issue. So scarcity can present in many different ways that then leads to this thing. What does it do? It impacts bandwidth. So bandwidth is your brain's computational capacity, ability to pay attention, make good decisions. Basically, it's all that stuff in the prefrontal cortex. Back in the day, for a while, we were all really focused. In my last class, we talked a lot about buzzwords. But and it's not really a buzzword. It's something that's real, but you don't hear it near as much as you did like 5 years ago. What does this refer to? What's the group of? I'll give you. They're called functions. What's the term that goes before functions? Executive functions. Remember how we used to use executive functions? Executive functions was a term that was around all over the place for a while, and now it's just kind of disappeared again. But anyway, this is your executive functioning. Right, it's your prefrontal cortex at work up here, and when you're feeling stress or scarcity, it begins to impact your bandwidth. And so what they have done is they did the studies on it. This is data from across the globe, not just a study. This is and basically scarcity can tax your mind enough to cause a 13-point drop in IQ. What does that mean?
You're just not thinking out in front of your brain. There's too much stress in being in that prefrontal cortex, so you can't think clearly. Yeah, your thoughts are not clear, so therefore you're being predictably irrational.
Yeah. And so this is your fluid intelligence too. This is your problem-solving skills impaired. This is enough to drop people in and out of categories that we would consider almost dangerous. So yeah, this is we took this idea, brought it in, and infused it into our work so that we could better help people recognize that this is a human problem. It's all of us. We all go through this, and we wanted to look at all of that. And so I'm going to tie into why we're here today. In 2016, we were asked through CSBG to put together a statewide symposium on scarcity. But the focus of the symposium was not on individual scarcity, it was on organizational scarcity. And the reason was because as I went out into the world, and worked with organizations, you would see that organizations were making a lot of the same kind of irrational decisions that you would see individuals make. And I wanted to explore how organizations navigated that and potentially survived it, because our organizations, almost by virtue of the way our funding is set up, very frequently is in a space of being financially scarce, right? The way that your grants are set up and the way that all the different funding mechanisms are set up, we're not usually sitting on exorbitant piles of cash to where we would have what we'd call slack. So I wanted to see what would happen if we just had a conversation about organizational scarcity and to really explore how organizations navigate that, and is there a way of doing so that is maybe more successful. So in 2016 we did that, and so there's your definition. And so basically we spent 2 days talking with organizations about this idea, and then Fred was there at that particular day, and I don't know how much work he'd done on that before, but he liked this idea, and he's done more work with it since than we have, and has a lot more content around this. So I'm here to kind of kick this off. This is how we got here, and now I'm going to hand it off to Joanne to tell you the next steps. No, I'm telling Fred, you're ending it. Fred, you're up next, I think.
You did a nice lead in, Fred. Yeah, there you go.
So this is sort of what we ultimately put together so that people could see here's your individual and there's your organizational and how it.
Are you photobombing?
I just moved. Those are mine. Yeah. Well,
Okay. I had never heard of the concept scarcity until Shawn and Joanne introduced me to those terms and the book that you saw there. And there was this conference, as he mentioned, in Denver that was really quite a good conference. And what I thought about, having looked at some of their materials, that at the individual, that there had to be a similar, essentially a parallel universe for organizations. Oh, I got the clicker here. Okay. So this was your slide, basically, right? Yeah. Okay. So essentially, Shawn was talking about this, planning and directing, nurturing culture, work environment, sort of the big picture. And what dawned on me, and this is yours too, the tunneling.
I can finish
Talk
that.
about tunneling.
Yeah. Why don't you
So
pick that?
basically, what this is now.
Yeah.
So what this is that when we talk about predictably rational, what you see here is what they call the scarcity trap. We call it a shortage cascade, right? So you have a shortage up top. When a person begins experiencing scarcity, shortage, the first thing they begin to do is tunnel, right? And bridge up poverty, as I mentioned before, that was tyranny of the moment. You begin to tunnel. What does that mean? It's tunnel vision is what it is, but not exactly vision. But your brain's tunneling, and what goes, those executive functions, is you begin to have a lack of planning. And when you have a lack of planning, like your client waits till the last minute, what they look for convenient solutions. Most convenient solutions are more expensive in some capacity, think payday loan, which increase all the costs, which then does what? Creates the next shortage, and now we're in a loop. So if you see, sorry. Next slide. Okay, I just want to make sure I have the next slide. So, so this is what happens. It's the same, right? Between the individual and the organization. And so what we started focusing on was this particular piece, because people are always like, yeah, so thanks, great for the information, tell us about the tunnel. Who the F cares, right? That doesn't help me, what do we do? And so what we wanted to do is to figure out what organizations had done. Like, are there organizations who had successfully, and we found that there was a pattern that they had all sort of successfully executed. And it started with this awareness, assessment, planning, implementation, review. And so it's sort of like, this is the space within the tunnel where you have to find a way to be able to create the space, right? So for instance, if it's a client of ours, if they're coming to a class, our class is 2 hours long over 4 weeks. That's space, right? And so in that space, now we have time to actually kind of dig into stuff. This might mean a board meeting for organization. It might mean something else, but there has to be space in here to begin to create this tunnel out. Without the space, we find that people don't actually successfully make it out. But these were the common things. So there were about like 20 different organizations that we had talked to that like had gone through some sort of serious, like, are we gonna make it out of this? These were the steps. And now, I think it's you. Sorry.
If it's a slide that has a lot of text on it, it's Fred's.
Yeah, let me tell you my theory of PowerPoints. I see them as basically textbooks with color and pictures. So my thinking is take the material, use it, and this is, when you go to the website for the Colorado Association, you can download any of these PowerPoints, mine, Shawn's, whatever. So I know you're taking pictures, if you want that right away, but they are there as well. And my feeling is if you can use the material, use it. Don't, just use it. So you're right, I put a lot of junk in the PowerPoints, and okay.
It's not junk.
No, I know that. Yeah. All right. So here's what happened. When Shawn and Joanne had asked me to speak, and I was familiar with the left-hand side of that, more or less, and it dawned on me, given the work I have done over the years for both, management development, consulting, and organization behavior, as well as providing software, that it hit me that there was actually a parallel between the client and the organization. And I also ran a nonprofit for a while, so I'm fully aware of what those feelings are like. So what I try to do here is it's a left to right match, showing essentially the parallels and why there is scarcity in this case, usually nonprofits. Most of you are probably local government here, but that applies as well. So you certainly fund nonprofits, okay? So if we take a look at the benefits for the clients, you can see the traditional programs, TANF, SNAP, and the agency itself derives administrative fees for operating those programs. So they are as dependent on those programs as the clients. Time-limited eligibility for the client, time-limited qualifications for public and private grants, the same structure. Okay, funds are restricted or programmatic, no free cash, identical. Funds are restricted or programmatic, no free cash. And lastly, the client requests a specific benefit, the organization goes after the grant. So if you wonder at times, and again, walking in organizations, there is sort of that mindset. I had once asked another executive director what his job was. And he said, look at my knees. He said, I beg all the time. That's what he did to keep his organization alive, nonprofit, all right. So let's take a look at another parallel. This is seeking and applying for resources. So I think it's reasonable to conclude that most clients come to the agency as the last resort, and they don't want to be there. So most, in this case, human service agencies, grants is the only last resort. Primary role of the ED is to seek funds. Now, there have been some nonprofits that are entrepreneurial that open up for-profit businesses. They do exist, and they're smart for doing that. You know some?
Our organization.
Okay.
We are pretty much totally earned income based.
Okay.
So we earn revenue from membership and training fees.
Okay.
And have very rarely had grants.
Good.
Foundations don't want to give you money so you can sell registrations to work.
Well, I mean, I've seen nonprofits set up accounting consortiums where they do the accounting for like 3 or 4 other agencies, and they get a fee. There was one that was in the cookie and candy business that was pretty successful in Pennsylvania, so.
Anybody who runs a thrift store.
Yes, thrift store is another one, thank you, right.
We have rental income, so that helps a lot.
Okay, rental income, right, own properties and things like that, sure. So again, parallel universe here, apply for benefits, apply for resources, dependent on the organization's direct and referral, the nonprofit or the human services, dependent on other organizations for funding, lives on the grant or private third-party funding. And you can see the parallels here. The client really has their own resources, the agency really has its own resources. The client lives day to day, the agency lives year to year. And for the clients, ongoing need for benefits. For the agency, always looking for the next grant. I mean, this is reasonably how this thing works. All right. let's take a look at wages, salaries, and benefits. So if we look at, this was for Colorado, it's a $14.81 an hour minimum wage, about 185% of the poverty. And one of the questions, and I used it, I guess, in my keynote this morning, what does it take for a person living in Colorado with 2 children, $60 an hour? And the reality is that the wages, a lot of times in human service agencies, are not the wage that you need to live. I had done work in Connecticut in one of these big agencies. They would close literally once a month, and the staff would apply for benefits. All right? This does exist. And they qualified, and the agency couldn't pay more. I mean, they were paid okay, but they still qualified, especially for things like LIHEAP and things like that. All right. So again, living wage, Colorado is $25.47 an hour, about $50,000 annually. I know that staff in certain areas are not making that money, okay? And the other thing too is the staff at times do not understand the value of the subsidized benefits provided to the clients. And the clients don't understand that they have an income, but it's not cash. It's an income through the benefits, so that's another issue. And that's the income equivalent, which is the third bullet, the unearned income. And you can, if you monetize what a healthcare, and leaving aside the changes that are coming, monetize food stamps, monetize energy, childcare, frankly, you're doing pretty well. All right, and by pretty well, meaning a lot of those things are covered. You've heard of the cliff effect, which is the more you earn, you lose the benefits and things like that. And as you can see, the third bullet on the right, I've heard this. Staff frequently state that their clients are better off than they are. I've seen staff cry in meetings when that dawned on them, okay? Clients don't recognize the value, and it said that other bullet, the agencies, again, have staff that are eligible and get benefits while they're home working. The data for a lot of us, I just wanted to put it up there. The living wage data is the MIT Living Wage Calculator. Please look at that. It's free. It's a fantastic website. And you can go to every state, every county, municipality, all size families, poverty levels, cost of living, expenses. It's amazing. And you use that material. It's real, and it's obviously it's university-based, so they're not making a political statement. And then the last bullet is a lot of agencies have staff that were former clients, and when they and when they become either staff may have been former clients, but they also recognize the value of those subsidized benefits. So I just wanted to give you a quick chart here. This is living wage for Colorado 2025. That's the MIT Living Wage Calculator. So if you can see a living wage here for a person with no children is $25.47, and again if one adult and a child $47.11. And you can see the poverty wage below that, and below that the minimum wage. So, when I showed this screen this morning where a Pennsylvania legislator said that he doesn't believe everyone should be entitled to a living wage, or when Trump the other day was asked about raising the federal minimum wage, and he said people just need to work harder. That was, if you think about it, a non sequitur. I mean, you could work your butt off at 7 1/4, but again, from a person who's probably never had to deal with any of this stuff, right? All right.
It's almost kind of a slap in the face, too, to people who are already working
Yes.
plus, and then their president can say, oh, you just need to work harder.
Well, I would call it intentional ignorance. I don't know what else to call it, okay? Being polite here. Yeah, yes. Right. This one to me was really interesting when I did the research on this. We know that the social determinants of health, low poverty creates poor health creates poverty. That's a truism. So we know that low-income clients are at greater risk of mental illness, physical illness, others. We also know mental stress. If you're poor, more likely to have high blood pressure, obese, dietary things. And again, low-income people more likely to smoke, less access to fresh food. But here's what's interesting is when we looked at, this was CDC, this was published in 2016, there were metrics about people working on the jobs. Social service workers and truck drivers were the least healthy, okay, and based on that. And if you, basically, all of these 7 should be working for you to be healthy. If you look at the bottom, basically 3.5% of all workers met all 7, meaning 6 of 7 is associated with less likelihood of dying from heart disease. And essentially, 14.6% of social service workers met 2 or fewer. So the majority of people delivering social services only met 2 of those 1 through 7 criteria, which is, when you think about it, pretty wild, right? And when I worked in the nonprofit, we were a research and advocate group. We didn't do direct services, so we didn't quite feel that issue. But I've talked to folks many times, and you probably know this as well, if not better. People get burned out. They're just tired of it. They dream about it. They can't fix things, that type of stuff. So that's quite real. I think we have one more. Oh, yeah. So lastly, I think the client element of crisis, obtain services to achieve stability, reduce or eliminate crisis. And how many times have you seen this? We're in a firefighter mode, we're in crisis, we don't have enough people, we can't do this, unsure of funding, and this is real. Okay, so I think the next one, oh, there is one more, okay. This is the one you created, right?
Yeah, you can go ahead on that. It's not your slide,
Yeah, she just separated them, okay. All right, so the last one is, what does the client do? Try to set goals, establish a plan, self-manage, implement, document the outcomes, become less dependent, more self-sufficient. And here's where the agency really comes in. And again, agencies just aren't doing this as well as they could. Obtain resources to look long-term. I've had an executive director not too long ago just look me straight in the face and go, grants come and grants go. And they had this incredible program, and I said a year before it was going to end, they were putting technology into schools and libraries. And I said, this is fundable, just do it, just build this out, you built the capacity. Nope, grants come and grants go. That was really knucklehead thinking, and that's probably not untypical. Strategic plan, you're supposed to do this, long-term goals. How many folks link the services and outcomes to the budget and share that information? I mean, the analogy is if you had, well, theoretically a checkbook, which a lot of folks don't have anymore, but it's as if you had no idea of the money coming in and going out, and you just wrote checks all day long. And that element is there. You want to document the service delivery, document the outcomes, and proactively. And this is what's missing in our industry. We don't really market ourselves well. This return on investment, you can monetize the benefits here received, and we just don't do a great job on that. So people still perceive us as handouts, giveaway, lazy people, and they get away with those stereotypes. And there's obviously an element to that, but a lot of that's not true. So basically, the whole point of this was to, let's turn this back over to Joanne here. The parallels between the client and the organization are there. They're very strong. One more example. Years ago in Michigan, they did a client satisfaction survey, and they asked the client and the caseworker the identical questions. Was your problem solved? Did you benefit from, all the standard questions of success. They matched up the survey to the client, to the worker, and the clients rated the workers higher than the workers rated themselves. There's your stress, there's this. The workers thought they weren't doing good jobs, they weren't helping. The clients didn't say that. They said, no, I benefited. So again, the lesson is share this data, share this with the staff so they understand that it's not the way they think it is. So, okay, turn this back over. If you want it there. There you go.
Thank you. So, yeah, my background is in psychology, so we're going to take me a little turn and do a little more psychological look at some of these things here, right? So we've been talking about scarcity, and scarcity is in a continuum. And these are some of the terms that people commonly use in this. A lot of times people will say, well, there's scarcity and abundance, like that this is sort of a binary. But really it's not just one bucket versus another bucket. We have a continuum, right? Scarcity being very little, then sufficiency is somewhere in there about I have enough, right? Abundance is I am blessed with quite a bit of stuff, whatever. And then there's this concept of excess as well. Sometimes we have more than maybe is ideal for us too. So we've been talking about scarcity having mental and emotional effects. Having what feels like excess can be another way. Sometimes, perhaps we've got, we perceive an excess because like a lot of money's coming through. Like Shawn was bringing up COVID era funding. it felt like there's a lot. There's a lot. We had slack. We had cushion. We'll talk about that. Maybe that's abundance, but sometimes we get into a perception of really, like just, it feels like it's going to be this way permanently. We have everything we need. We always will have everything we need. We don't have to work at it. So there's this little continuum going on here. And this is a perception, right? Yeah, you could figure out, Fred, we could figure out a way of like objectively scaling this, but it would be your perspective or my perspective on it. This is perspective there. And there's a continuum for everything. Like Shawn was talking about, there's different scarcity of different things. You can be in one place, you can be scarcity for money, but abundance of time, right? Is that a concept that that resonates? What do you think about that? And how do you think it might apply for your work? And whether your clients or the folks, your organization itself.
Through the money and time.
Money, time, resources.
Any kind of scarcity and abundance.
Yeah, in general, yeah. We like, what do you have a lot of? What do you have a lot of? And
Patience.
you have a lot, ooh.
I got a lot of patience.
Abundance of patience?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Abundance of patience and very little time to be able to do certain things, so it kind of makes me feel like I'm putting clients off sometimes, but it's not intentional.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to fit all the clients into this 8-hour time block, but I can only scratch the surface, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I can't dive deep because you can only scratch the surface with each client, and then it's like, okay, we scratched that, okay, next. And so I have this abundance of patience with everybody because everybody's in a different area. And so you have to have understanding and patience with where they're at in their process. But I don't feel like I have enough time to be able to work with them and get them through these processes to get them thinking more clearly and how they can actually move forward. So.
Yeah, there's a huge range of things we could scale this way. I remember one place I worked with, somebody ordered wrong, and there was not just an abundance, there was an excess of manila folders. There were enough manila folders to put one piece of paper in for like everything in the entire agency for years. It's a resource. I don't know exactly how you'd be able to use that too much, but yeah.
I think sometimes with my clients, what I see is they've moved from a concept of scarcity to sufficiency, but it seems like an abundancy. So it's like they're kind of like skipping this sufficiency. So like, oh, this is what it means to stay on track.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like a mindset that sufficiency is abundancy. And so I have more now than I had, and therefore I don't have to think about what the next day is or what the next month is going to be or the next 2 months is going to be.
Yeah.
And so I kind of wonder if there's had a scarcity for so long, when you get to sufficiency, that it seems like a lot. And so
Yeah.
you don't manage or you don't think. It's a mindset, maybe, I'm wondering.
So I would argue that, I'm not arguing at all.
I'm hoping
I would insert the idea of a concept that's along the lines of what I call with economic adaptation, but hedonic adaptation or other kinds of adaptation, which is, it's like, when you're younger and you're making, the minimum wage or whatever, and that, you're figuring out how to get by on that, and you figure out how to do it. You're like, oh, I'm surviving on this amount of money, and then you get a raise, right? And now all of a sudden you move up to this next amount of money, and it feels like a lot, but then what's called hedonic adaptation is you move up to that level, and so then when somebody goes to take that away, then all of a sudden it feels more painful, even though you know that you have lived on that before.
Exactly.
But we are constantly in a place of adapting our feelings to the amount of resources that are around us. And to Joanne's point, it's a massively subjective experience. I was talking about in my earlier class. We all know people who have extreme wealth, but they might not feel wealthy, right?
Yeah.
And it has to do with their own personal narratives and their stories and stuff like that. And so objectively, we're like, dude, you can stop working. And they're like, no, I need
Right.
more.
Right.
And, yeah. So this idea of adapting, to your point, like somebody moves from to all of a sudden it feels like right, and so they just want to break.
Yeah.
Right.
They've been stressing hard. They want to break.
I'm gonna coach
Huh?
you
But
up.
there's still there's no room to close.
Right.
Or there's no,
Right. From the outside,
from the outside.
we're there saying, keep working, because, you got to,
I think my biggest personal struggle with all of that was once I moved out of scarcity and into sufficiency, I still was coming from a lack mindset. And then finally moving into abundance, I'm still to this day, like, coming into this scarcity, oh, I know I've got this, and I've got this much in my savings, but man, if that goes, I'm sitting here again,
If I just made $10 more an hour, it'd be great.
Yeah.
But you know exactly like you said, you make $10 more an hour.
Uh-huh.
It's no big.
it is all perception.
Right.
Yeah, and you're hanging on to the trauma from the past.
Yeah,
Yes.
because I grew up
Yeah.
in a lack mindset, in a scarcity household. So then,
Yeah.
like, once I started making that income, and I'm like, oh wow, I have money left over after these paychecks. What did I not pay? What happened?
Something's
This is
got
gonna
to be wrong.
disappear. Something's gonna happen.
Yeah, we're trained. Yeah. Yeah, John?
That's why we have more toilet paper than we need.
Yes.
Just don't know.
You never know when you might need it. Stock up. Yeah.
When I was a young hippie musician, I made well below the poverty line, lived in a communal household, had no health care, nothing. And I thought I was just fine. My pay was being able to go out and play music, and I was perfectly happy with that situation. Matter of fact, I felt like, wow, I'm doing really good.
You were.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it really is perceptual up to a point. I wasn't starving. I did eat peanut butter for days at times, but
Yeah.
once I had kids, that changed radically because I was responsible for them.
Hmm.
So that was a point I was making in my earlier class today, which is the subjectivity of this is immense, where you can have clients who are perfectly fine living with nothing. And our tendency is to put our values on that and tell them they need to do something differently when that's not what they want, right? Whereas you can have a person who has an immense amount of money and they still feel poor. So it's a very subjective experience, and to relate to see that, both at the individual level and at the organizational level.
Yes. Yes. Ooh, trying back around.
I do that work.
I know a lot of this discussion is around the economic and the financial side of it, but I'm trying to understand the continuum and like from an organizational level, we're working in a, like I'm thinking about my human service agency right now. We are looking at scarcity because of things being pulled back, but purely financial. But I know we have an abundance of knowledge, like our staff.
Oh, perfect
We talk a
abundance of
lot about, like, our
knowledge.
retention. Like we've been able to have really good retention with our staff. And so we have this abundance of knowledge. And so we know that we're able to like do our jobs better because we have people there. So like, well, financially, yes, scarcity, we're looking at that, but we've been able to like, I think we have an abundance of knowledge. If
Perfect,
people
yes.
start leaving because we're unable to pay them, I know then that abundance is going to.
Right. So there's a sense of scarcity, maybe can I hang on to it? Yeah.
Right, and I think, and
Yeah.
I'm kind of seeing like that's where that
Yeah.
planning goes, and like,
Uh-huh.
these are the things we would do.
Yeah, we'll talk about some of that, but thank you for bringing that up because that's perfect on that. That and also you can have an abundance of partnerships, right? An abundance of community, abundance of a lot of things that are useful, that are not directly monetizable. Yeah. So, yeah, so we talked about slack a little bit. Slack and cushion are kind of related terms. And that's something that fits into this, our sense of slack and our sense of a cushion is, I don't know if anyone puts money into mattresses anymore.
I hope not. It's terrible.
It might be a good investment.
We actually were working with a client recently that did keep their money under the mattress, and they were working towards something, and of course it got stolen, and just,
Three of the most common places for a thief to look is under your mattress, in your freezer, and in your toilet tank.
And I would
Mhm.
So there was an enormous amount of cash on Friday afternoon, and there's a very lack of cash on Thursday.
Yes. Abundance of cash on Friday afternoon, scarcity of cash. Yeah, yeah. We usually talk about slack in terms of things like time. Yeah, I got some slack time. Yeah, that means I don't have to keep pushing right now. Slack time, you can decompress, you can be creative. Slack is useful. Too much slack, excess of slack, not so much, right? Cushion is money set aside time. So, you're going to have time. You got cushion. I've got a deadline, but I've got some cushion in the time there, right? So both of these help build our bandwidth, right? They help create a sense that, I can use my, it's okay. Frees up executive functioning. I can think, and I can be creative. I can be adaptive. Okay. Scarcity has a lot of effects. I got this slide from a program called Trauma of Money, because like money causes trauma, right? It's a good program. Scarcity does a lot of things, some of which can be actually benefits. Like Shawn was talking about, short-term stress can lead to higher productivity and things like that. With scarcity, short-term at least, you get a focus dividend that right in the moment, I am going to be totally focused on what I need in order to get out of this scarce situation. Longer-term leads, that focus dividend becomes tunneling. Scarcity can lead to avoidance and soothing behaviors as a trauma reaction. Temptation tax is when, what is temptation tax?
That's when I really want that coffee. No, the temptation tax is like what he was saying. Scarcity takes a tax on your mental capacity to be able to make rational decisions. So you're looking for that quick fix, that thing that's going to make you feel like it's getting better. Like, look what I have. I have this now, so I must be doing better. When in all reality, that should have been saved. So that way, you don't end up going back into the shortcoming and being like, oh man, I guess I shouldn't have spent that money on that, 65-inch TV.
Yeah. The way that it fits directly into temptation tax would be like, okay, so I got my tax refund. I got $1,000 sitting there. Tax rich, yeah. It's burning a hole in my pocket, right? The temptation is it's a tax on my cognitive functions, my ability to, impulse control. All of those wonderful pastries, you walk by it a few times, yeah. And you think, okay, I'm not gonna eat it, and eventually, willpower's gone. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually used to tell my employees around tax time, don't go thinking you're tax rich and that you get to quit your job, because your rent piles up very quickly, and who knows when the next time you're going to find another job is in order to meet your income tax bracket for the next year.
So you can get that back.
Yeah, we actually had a sign that we made and hung up on the wall that had this guy running with a bag of money, and it said, don't become tax rich. And it was just a warning to those employees, because they're working a job they didn't really want to work. They just had to take it, But it was a warning to them, like, hey, we understand you don't really want to be here, but don't get those taxes and think that it's problem solved,
Yeah. Because if your brain goes in it, like that continuum we were talking about, I get my tax refund. I can be in a place of feeling abundance. I can also be in a place where it's really excess, and I got to get rid of some of this. Yeah. And oddly enough, there are lots of people out there that will help me get rid of money.
There's way more people that will help you get rid of it than there are to help you gain it.
True. Yeah. Okay, bandwidth tax, we talked about that earlier. Like making it harder to, think your way through all these things. Trade-off thinking is where you start, when you're tunneling, you think you have a binary choice. if I choose this, I can't choose that. If you're in more of a sense of sufficiency or abundance, you might think, well, you know, I can choose this, and if I do that, I can also have that, or here's this other choice. When you start thinking about it, this or that, got to do it right now. And if I choose this, that one's gone forever. Yeah.
I call them justified. But I can justify spending.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, and we'll talk about slack in the suitcase. There's a metaphor that, let's keep this one in mind when we talk more about the organizations. So we all have a suitcase for traveling, right? We're all gonna go on a trip, right? Everyone's got a suitcase. Yeah, I might have big, old-fashioned suitcase back when we, didn't care whether it fit in the overhead or not, right? And John might have a little teddy carry-on. That's all you got. Okay. Yeah. So if I'm thinking, okay, I'm not sure what the weather is going to be, where I'm going to go. So, is it going to rain? It could rain. Am I going to want to go swimming? And like, how many pairs of shoes? Shoes for this, shoes for that. If I'm going to go hiking. I got a big suitcase. I can put it all in. I don't care. I don't have to make choices. I put it all in. Take it with. So John, if you're just, you're going on this nice trip and you only got your little carry-on, and you're thinking like, I don't know what the weather is going to be like. You start thinking about what's going to fit in your suitcase, right? You make choices. So
I wear those shoes.
you have that shoe. These shoes are on my feet. They don't have to be on my carry-on. I don't have a backup pair, right? And you get to the place where you're going and you think, wow, look at that pair of shoes for sale. That's a really good price, and I like those shoes. Do you think? What? Yeah. You could buy another suitcase. But are the shoes going to fit into the suitcase you got? Right?
I feel like you packed my suitcase.
Yeah.
Tie the strings together and put them around your neck.
You can get creative. Yeah. But you have to think about it. So anytime we're in a state of scarcity, we're thinking we have a tiny suitcase, right? We have to get creative about what we can pack in, what we can't. Which means we're spending a lot more time thinking about what we're going to pack and how we're going to pack it. And each time something new comes up, we have to make another thought about it. What goes in the suitcase? Right? So all these things come with scarcity. And we'll talk about the suitcase thing in a bit, too. And we're going to talk about slot machines for the time being. All right? Scarcity loop. So, anyone here like take a picture of my slot machine? So, who likes playing slot machines? Okay.
I always lose, so I don't play.
Yeah, I always lose too. So, why do you like playing slot machines?
Instant gratification, either way.
Boom, boom. Yeah, you don't even have to pull the lever anymore.
Thoughtless, mindless, like,
It's an adrenaline high level in a really quick instance, which is like dopamine. It is dopamine.
Totally dopamine, yeah. Yeah, back in the old days, like, yeah, John, yeah,
Decades.
yeah, decades back. Slot machines were boring, right? Not many people played them. If you're going to go to Vegas, you did the roulette table, that sort of thing, right? Nobody played slot machines. Then there's one guy they hired, forget his name, who decided, I'm going to make this more interesting. And he used some of the things coming out of behavioral economics at the time, right? And figured out a way of making it more interesting, right? It has a higher rate of return, but it's variable, unpredictable rewards. But you knew it paid out, because the machine would bing, 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 and you hear the bing, bing, bings, right? So you had the opportunity to win, but it was an unpredictable reward, right? And then you could keep pushing the button. So therefore, people are sitting there 24 hours a day playing slot machines. Yeah.
Doesn't this go with that old saying about the definition of insanity being to repeat an action?
Expect a different result.
You know what it reminds me of is like how we think it's funny that squirrels will sit there and keep hitting the same button for their meth. Or whatever it is. We're like making fun of the squirrels, but we're over there like, ding, ding, ding.
Uh-huh.
This is gonna work this time.
That's what we're, yeah, and they got those three little dials going there, and you can watch. And they set the timing of them, the way they spin. And one of them comes up, bing, and the next one, oh, I got a match, and you're waiting for the third. Does that sound familiar?
But it is.
Yeah. Yeah, dopamine. Dopamine is the, yeah, dopamine is not the feel-good neurochemical. People call it that. Really, dopamine is the searching for feeling good, or searching for bad stuff to get away. But so dopamine is the wanting part, not the liking once you get it. So it's a dopamine hit.
Yep, they feed my stress. Slot machines do, because when I do that, you know what I mean? Like if I hit it and I see those numbers go down, I'm like, ooh, shouldn't have put 20 bucks in. Hit it again. Oh, okay, now I'm down to 10. Hit it again. 5. What am I gonna do here? And then you win up to 25, and that's where I'm like, cool, 5 bucks. I won. Cash out, and I'm done, and I don't go back because the whole time I'm like,
Since this is now a symposium on gambling, I think there's also a point in there where we discover learned helplessness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where you get down to $2, you're like, oh, fuck it.
It's, yeah, $2, it's
And
not
usually
worth
I'm
it.
just gonna go ahead and punch out because I've lost anyway.
Yep, so it's all gone.
yep.
Yeah. But then, yes, some people, you make the extra 5, I'm good, yeah.
Yeah, I'm good, I'm done. I'm cashing out, and I ain't touching another machine because that was way too close for
Oh,
comfort
no,
for me.
because if I can win 5, then I can win 50.
I'm on house's money.
Now I'm looking at the Progressive, and I work $19,000.
Woohoo!
Sounds like someone who knows their business.
Woohoo!
Used to work at a casino. In credit, actually.
Oh boy. That's a story, yeah. All right.
So in high finance, that's trading on the margins, I think.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So, how does this work for our organizations? Have you ever applied for a grant, right? And things are online these days, so it makes it easy. There's opportunity. You know, we go on to BidNet, and they say, "Oh, this is a match for you. You can apply. You can apply. Bing. Obviously, got to write a bunch of stuff. I can apply. Bing, 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 bing. I can apply for this one too. You know, and then you're waiting. There's a longer term. It's not as fast as the slot machine, but you're starting to think, yeah, I could probably get this grant. I can get this grant. Sometimes you get clues from, you say, oh yeah, I'm matching what they're wanting. I'm matching what this organization wants, or a foundation is telling you, yeah, we'd like to invite you to apply because we think that your organization, could be somebody we want to fund, and woohoo, keep pushing that button, right? And sometimes it comes out, sometimes it doesn't. Yeah, and we can get the mission drift because then we can always apply for another one. Does it feel like a relevant concept?
Yeah, because as you're chasing those grants, it's just like watching that bar spin. Like, ooh, you can apply for this one. That's your first bar. And you're like, oh, I'm gonna apply, and then your second bar drops, and then your third bar is where they're like, after all the writing and trajectories you've just done, we just don't see it as a good fit. And then you're like, oh, it's that detrimental, it's that loss. So then
But
you're
here's
like,
another.
oh, but there's another one. Yeah.
Yeah, Joe.
Yeah, we don't seek grant funding. Generally, we have gotten a few. So we don't really have mission drift from that. But as our revenue from training income has gone down, we have a significant cash reserve. So there's no real short-term emergency. But the board members keep suggesting these short-term emergency solutions.
Because they're
in
trained in
crisis
this.
management. We've got a crisis
Yeah.
Really? You know, and how are we gonna
Potential.
do that?
He's like, hey, John, you know what? If we did training about gambling and we let them pull slots when they did the training,
Maybe that'll sell.
yeah, we could get people to sign up and they could give us money and yeah.
Right? And we have a few tracks that are steady income generators. Motivational interviewing is a good example.
Mm-hmm.
And others not so much so. Another suggestion was, well, let's drop all the training except the ones that are successful. I said, oh, sure, that sends a really good message.
Yeah, and also you don't know if some of the new ones might turn into be a success.
Exactly, or turnaround. You know, there are a number of factors at play in this, but it's really, my point is simply that crisis management, short-term thinking
Right.
isn't going to solve your issue.
No, right. Yeah, there's a lot of short-term thinking that goes into cutting back on anything. I was in one as a mental health center. This was a mental health center, and we were short of funds. And the business manager said, people are going through too many pens. We're going to ration pens. You have to come to my office to get another pen.
Mine was batteries. I understand that.
Been there too. She also, okay, we were a mental health center. She said, I don't know why we're going through so many tissues. This is expensive, guys. You get 1 box of tissues for the month. And so I said, if my clients cry and I'm out of tissues, can I go to get toilet paper?
I'm sorry, we're currently cutting back on tissues. Could you just use your sleeve?
Yeah. Bandwidth issue, perhaps. Some cognitive functioning going, yeah.
Yeah, mine was batteries, I said, because we just installed on all of our bedrooms, to prevent other clients going into another client's room, we installed numerical code locks on the
Oh.
doors.
Yeah.
These doors take 8 AAA batteries
Ooh.
to run.
Ooh.
So I had a door that was going dead, and I said, hey, I need some batteries. And she's like, oh, they're in the office, come pick them up. So I came in and I picked them up. She handed me 4 batteries. And I went, okay, wait a minute. I just told you I have 9 doors. They take 8 batteries apiece. And you handed me 4 batteries. And she goes, oh, they take 8? And I said, yeah. She goes, well, just use those 4 and come back if you need more. I'm going to need more. So I'll be back in a few days.
Never.
Out the door and come back in.
Yeah, it's
Half a
been 2 months. I finally got an 18-pack of batteries that I purchased because I was tired of being without batteries.
Yeah.
But I think that's interesting that you say that, because I'm kind of in that, I work for Jefferson County in the foster caring program, and we're really looking at, housing, employment, everything in Maslow's hierarchy of needs to make you be able to reunify with your children. And I am in a scarcity now, and I'm hoarding diapers. Because I have a resource that allows me to have the diapers, right? If a client doesn't pick them up, I put them aside so that when the next client comes in, I still order for the next client, but I can actually hand them. So I feel like I'm doing this revolving door, because right now I'm in crisis mode, because I know that there's the resource of diapers was just notified, oh, they got a 6-month extension. And in 7 months, I'm not gonna have that
Yeah.
resource.
I'd be hoarding diapers. I would. Yeah.
I mean, and I know that diapers are anywhere from $200 to $250 for a family if you have 1 or 2 kids, and so that is a huge amount of money. But again, I can see where I'm in that scarcity loop, because I'm in crisis management mode right now, and I don't really see what's going to happen in
Yes.
7 months. I'm
Yes.
really tunneling.
Yes, we got in.
I'm superly focused on my dividend.
Yes.
And my suitcase is not filled enough.
And you were trying to think how to pack into that little tiny suitcase. Huh? Yeah. Or you're given, like say your budget for diapers for folks that are buying them. Budget for diapers for the year is $20,000 usually, but they're saying like we have to cut back. We only have $10,000. Packing into a tiny suitcase. How many diapers? What kinds?
10,000 and stretch it out over the year, or do I look for the bang for the buck right now and order them all online, hoping that they don't go up or they don't go down, or
Yeah.
and I find a cheaper source
Yeah.
later on?
Or you would be spending a lot of your mental bandwidth watching prices of diapers at different places. Uh-huh.
Exactly.
Yep.
Click and keep it.
Yeah.
That's where we found social media comes in very, very handy, because we just go on to our Facebook page and say, hey, hey community, we need diapers, we need dish soap, we need laundry soap, we need these items, and you would not believe the amount of people who actually donate those items.
Yeah.
But if you say things like, we need blankets, we need bedding, we need clothing, it never shows up. But those smaller items, like the personal hygiene, the diapers, things like, it always shows up. Every single time, and in force.
So you think about, okay, I'll go to my donation group for the for the diapers, but when I have to buy pants for the folks in the residence, and
Yep.
but then we use the cash for it. Yeah. Yeah. Do we, as organizations, do we do the avoidance and soothing pain behaviors, which is like the reaction to excess scarcity, long-term scarcity? Sorry about that. Let me think. Do we ever like self-soothe?
Yeah.
Maybe. Okay.
Like, this too shall pass. This, this is just a phase. This is just a moment.
Mm-hmm. I'm not saying, yeah. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Like if staff all get together to have a pizza party or go to the bar afterward, whatever it is,
I think
Things-
we're gonna start having a lot of people calling off
Think of that as
or
team
calling
building
out.
rather than avoidance.
the what?
I think of that as team building rather than avoidance of pain, but could be both.
There are some times when you're doing it a fair amount,
Or
right?
even self-care could be considered pain soothing, because everything that is stacking, you have to decompress.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you end up getting like the call-outs and the things like that, where people are just feeling overwhelmed themselves.
Yeah.
And so self-care can be a form of pain soothing
Yes.
internally.
Yeah. But yeah, it's an individual thing or a group thing to figure out. Are we doing this as an adaptive way of managing stress that just kind of we have to deal with? Or are we sinking further and further into these behaviors as a way of, okay, it's just too much, it's too much, too much?
It's a way to think about the bandwidth tax. We're thinking on it on an individual level, but in a scarcity mindset for so long, you start to lose IQ. If in an organization, if you're in a scarcity mindset for a long time in an organization, do you start losing good people? Is that the equivalent to IQ in an organization? Like the bandwidth is,
Yeah.
you're losing your good people.
Yeah.
You're going somewhere else.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out if this is relevant or it's not relevant. I had a session in Jefferson County recently, and one of the things that we have always tried to do is kind of call out the elephant in the room, right? Because I think it's, if you can create a safe place to talk about things, it's better. But we were talking about economic adaptation, we were talking about scarcity, and everybody was in there talking about their clients. Oh, my client this, my client needs that, my client needs this, my client needs that. And this is a group of people I know, because I've been working with this particular group for a long time, high retention rate. And then I said, how many of you guys right now are worried about losing your job? And every hand in the room went up. Right? And I was like, why aren't we talking about that? That's, that has to be taxing them, no matter how knowledgeable they are, no matter how useful they are, but if they're in fear, if they're in this same mode, then how is that impacting their ability to stay focused on what they're doing? So that knowledge base that we have can actually be impacted by just not even addressing. And so like, it was almost like, by bringing up the elephant in the room, you could feel the collective sigh of relief of amongst the staff, but you could feel the collective, the supervisors were all like, because they had talked about it, you know, but like they're just bringing it up and putting it out that this is what's happening. And I think what happens a lot, and especially this happened, I was talking with people in Boulder County, and they were saying that as all the stuff initially started happening in January with Doge and all that kind of stuff, I should have said that. It wasn't Boulder County, it was some other county. It was a county in Oregon.
County a little north of Denver.
Yeah. But basically they were saying that management had told them not to share information with staff for fear of staff leaving. And that is like, okay, now you got informational scarcity. The staff doesn't know what's going on. They don't know how to respond. And so you got these internal dynamics that could potentially impact the quality of service being provided, et cetera, et cetera. I think I'm piggybacking on what you're saying.
That's exactly what I'm thinking of. I mean, if we have, you know, I do a lot of hiring, and so when we have staff come in, they're very excited to give back to the community and serve the community. And then we call now seasoned, and you know, the more that they're doing it and they're in this human service environment where rules are changing, things are changing, you know, we're talking about, not providing over, you know, just as all of these things are impacting them, you sort of see it go. Like the enthusiasm leaves, they're still there, but I think we've moved into more of an apathy space now where they're showing up doing their job. But the quality of the work, I don't.
Going through the motions.
Yeah, and so that's where I'm like, I'm reading this and so trying to think about it in scarcity, that bandwidth tax, like I definitely get that on the IQ side, but what are we losing? Like when we talk about bandwidth or burnout, I
Yes.
can't see that in there as well.
And it might not even be burnout, it's just, if I don't jump ship now, you know,
Will
there
I
might
lose
not
a
be a ship
chance?
to be on.
Uh-huh.
And so,
Uh-huh.
yeah,
Question for you, how many people do you think are already looking for another job? Like, do you think they're at that point where they're scared and they don't feel stable and they're starting to look somewhere else?
I think we talk, I'm with Larimer County, so not Boulder County. But, and I think we talk a lot about our retention. We talk about a lot about our retention rate as a good thing, and it is a good thing, especially when you're training people in public benefits and how to do that. But I think I think if they could, and we do a survey every year with the county, it is fairly high. Like if I were offered the same benefits, I would go elsewhere. That's fairly high compared to what our retention is, and I think that there is now, like, they're holding on. So we have people who are staying because there is a fear of going somewhere else and losing some of the benefits that they have, you know, and so that, you know, we're holding on. So we're having a lot of discussions of how do we infuse into our staff right now, like the training and the workforce to keep the quality there if they're staying with us.
You're in that first step. It's important. It's the first step. You're becoming aware of the dynamics of what's going on. And that gives you the information you're going into assessment. You're looking at those surveys, right? What else would be helpful for assessment?
Bring the employee, talk to the employees, like he said, just bring it up. Make it a topic of conversation, because if not, then we're in that avoidance stage.
Yeah.
And without the employees having any engagement in it, I mean, they work there too. You know, they put in their heart and souls into the same work. So why are we not bringing them in and having this discussion with them?
Yeah. Broadening bandwidth, so we can start planning and implementing and
Yeah, because you may have an employee or two out there who has a great
Back one?
idea.
the one before.
No, this one.
This one.
So this is back when I was talking at the beginning, I said this was sort of what we found, that organizations who had kind of successfully navigated this, these were sort of the common things. And that awareness that there was even a problem was a big deal, right? And this is the same thing that we see with individuals is, I identifying the fact that, oh my God, yeah, I am in something, but the assessment piece of this is very interesting because there are many ways of doing this. And I would say at the organizational level, what was very fascinating, especially with nonprofits, and you can, maybe you guys can help me translate this into government agencies, but the assessment piece is actually going back and asking, are we relevant? Is what we're doing needed, right? And so what we found was several organizations, as they went back in the assessment part, they actually reviewed their mission. And they recognized, and by doing the assessment and collecting the data around that, they actually changed their mission.
That is the key point, is the data. That
Right.
is what saves my program, is data. Every single year, every single quarter, I can go, this is how many people we've met. This is how many people we've had success with. And if it wasn't from that data component and that assessment component, there would be no program.
Right. Well, and so what we saw was we had this one woman who came up very vulnerable about it. She was really afraid that her organization was going out of business. And they recognized that they had this one element of their organization that was incredibly successful, but the rest of it wasn't. I'm not calling you out. But they actually did. They changed their whole mission to be about that piece. And what they did was they started looking for other organizations that could pick up the pieces that they weren't as successful on, so that they weren't competing necessarily for all these grant funds that went into this general. And so they focused on the things that they were really good at.
Yeah, and they knew that there were others in their community that were doing similar enough services, and which is diluting the fun. Yeah, huh? Yeah.
But it was really bringing the board in and being like, do we need to be here? Do we really need to exist? You know, is the current market saying that we should or shouldn't be here? And a lot of time it's, you know, I don't know, I mean, how you argue that for yourself, but like, if the funding isn't there, one of the issues is letting go of the fact that it might be just okay to not be there.
I mean, have we fulfilled our mission?
Have we
Is a good
fulfilled our
question
mission?
for an
It's one potential.
Right? When I first got in this business, I was very certain that the idea of being successful was going out of business. Right? And what I found is in our industry, we're always looking for more money. We're always looking for more money. And it's not about putting ourselves out of business, it's about growing our program. And that's, anyway, that's my
How's your tongue?
The hair in my mouth was like, shut up, shut up. But anyway, my point is, with the assessment piece, to really do that self-reflection, after you become aware, to do the self-reflection of, who are we? What are we? Is this what we need to be? Is this where we need to be going? And then from there, you know, with the data, with the story, as Fred would always say, is now you can go back and you can be like, okay, now this is maybe who we ought to be, and this is how we ought to do it. And so anyway, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that from that assessment, you can begin to do the rest of the stuff, but I think without an accurate assessment, you're flying totally blind.
Right. You're just making stuff up.
You can't go to the planning stage. Or
You can, but you're
you'll fail in the planning
So
stage.
one of the things I talk about in personal finance class is people say, I need to do a budget. And I'm like, have you ever saved your receipts to see where your spending is? And they're like, no. I'm like, well,
How can you make a budget?
okay, so.
What is a budget gonna
Have
do?
you ever actually looked at how much money you make? Not really. I know what goes into my bank account, but and so I'm like, look, there are two sides to a budget. There's income and expenses. If you're gonna make a budget, maybe you should know the information in that by collecting the actual data on it. And what happens is people don't collect it. What do? They make up a budget. Your clients do this when they come into your office. They make up a budget on the spot.
Right.
It's totally fictional. And then they're frustrated with themselves, or we're frustrated with them when they don't meet their budget, even though it was a work of fiction. Right? So the collecting of the data, real data, is important. And just to be honest, not because we want it to succeed, but does it make sense for it to succeed?
Yes.
I'll be quiet.
This is kind of the Roma circle, you know, assessment, planning, implementation, review, assessment, planning.
Yep.
da-da-da-da.
Yep, it
And
fits with Roma.
To put it in other terms, this is strategic planning. You have to do the assessment stage of it and look at what's going down.
Yes.
Yeah, all we've done is we've just said that like the tendency is once you enter into that scarcity is for that to go away, when we need it even more,
Yes.
right? And so you have to
And
create
this
that
is the way
space in
out.
there for
Mhm.
this process to happen. And that's
Yes. So how do we make the space, right? So I'm trying to wrap up because we're getting close to the end. Dan Siegel came up with a concept. It's called the window of tolerance, is what he calls it. But I like what the trauma money folks call it here, the window of resilience. So cognitively, sometimes we don't have enough arousal. Basically, we're in shutdown mode. Yeah, we're burnout. Like some of the folks that you were talking about that are like, just, yeah, okay, I'm just putting in my time. That's kind of where you're at. Too little arousal, too little dopamine in the system. On the other end, there's a hyper-arousal. That's when we're like, oh my God, the world is burning down, right? You're in crisis mode. Too much, too much. You're not thinking well at either side of that. What you want is to be in that optimal state. You can make intentional decisions. You can make good decisions in that point. So you're in the sweet spot where you're not feeling too much scarcity. You're not feeling overwhelmed or too much slack. You're not feeling the excess either. You're in the middle. If we're trying to plan as a group and we're not in that optimal state when we're doing the planning, then we get stupid things that come up like you're talking about. Right? Get stupid ideas, or ideas that just don't work for the organization. So we need to be in that optimal state, which is where a lot of the self-care routines go. Self-care for the individual, self-care also for the organization. How do we take care of ourselves as a group in order to be in that optimal state so we can do the planning, do the assessment, the planning and implementing that we had on the other slide. This is the way out of the tunnel, is be attentive to this. And then, the folks at the positive psychology group, they have a nice website, and you can find the individual strategies for a scarcity mindset at their website. And so we added some organizational ones here. This is partly, these are like strategies for being in that window of resilience so that you can plan your way out of that tunnel. So, does anything stand out to you? Like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense, or yeah, like what do you mean by that? Or something that you think, like, yeah, I want to go implement that. Or we're already doing this is good. What do you think?
My board is on various stages of the last slide. Some of them are, I won't say apathetic, but they're just kind of whatever.
They just like, they show up because I'm on the board, I gotta show up.
Like the ones that want a quick fix are super hyper. I need to bring them into that center space and do some serious, what we should invest in is strategic planning right now.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to convince them of that, to take, it's a time issue for the volunteers. I am sole staff, so I can't say to the staff, we're gonna do, I can say to myself, because I'm on the board with me, what good is it? So, yeah, I mean, these are all great strategies.
Well, and I like that if information sources don't add benefit, limit exposure to them. So it's kind of like what Shawn was saying about the mission statement. Like, do we still adhere to that mission statement? Is that still our mission? Or do we need to change? Do we need to, switch directions and come up with a new mission?
Yeah.
And are there things out there that we're actually accessing that don't necessarily add benefit or that we need, that we could drop off and then go for a different resource that could benefit better?
Sure. Yeah, we want to make sure our attention is going to the information sources that do add benefit. Yeah. And we're not doing the organizational equivalent of doom scrolling. I'm not sure exactly what that would be, but.
Yeah, we're just a thought that is, teach at, well, a lot of the material that I originally came up with was created at this place called the Gathering Place in Denver, where I was working with these women who were experiencing homelessness, and they had come into the organization, and I'm always interested in not only their finances, but all the resources that are available to them. And I would say there's 8 women in the room, and I'd say, hey, tell me about the resources that are available to you by virtue of being inside of this program. And one of the women would say, well, you know, on Tuesday they have haircuts here. And 4 of the women would be like, they give haircuts here?
Yeah.
And then another one would be like, yeah, and on Thursdays they have the little, you know, the little store where you can go in and get free soap. And 4 of the women were like, they get free soap? And you see where that's going? Like, so within the organization, the clients didn't even know what was available. And so then when I started doing this work with staff, I'd ask the staff, I'd say, by virtue of being in your organization, what services do your clients have? And they'd be like, oh, well, you know, on Tuesdays we have free haircuts.
Yeah.
And half the staff would be like, we do free haircuts?
Yeah.
Et cetera, et cetera. You see where this is going?
Yeah.
And so there are so many resources, but we all feel like we have to be everything to everyone. And so, and it's hard because, you know, one of the things we do, we want to collaborate, or we want to understand, we want to outsource and all that kind of stuff. And it's hard within our organizations to even, like, the resources are constantly changing. So to keep track of what is out there is very difficult. But I would argue that there is a lot of resources, even with the pullbacks and stuff like that. I still think there's a lot of resources if we can get to a place where we get out of and we get to a place of being strategic, and then I think that there is a doorway out of this, which has been my purpose of talking about economic adaptation. So anyway, point being is I think if we can think it through, and, you know, I was thinking about, you know, building a supportive network, which is, can we be better with our partner organizations and communicative, and we were trying to build that out with DemCan a long time ago, Fred knows about, and like, how do we all work more strongly together as a result of all this, I think is something to look at. So, anyway, I'll put that on the list.
And on that note, yeah, it is time. We have run out of time. We have scarcity of time left in this. Thank you all for coming. Yeah, it was a good conversation.